Okay, well, we're here together for another TOG chat. How are you today, Laurel?
I'm good. How are you, Bob?
I'm doing well. Doing well, all things considered. It's Friday when we record these things. So yeah, I think you and I decided that we should probably weigh in on what not-for-profits should be thinking about right now in terms of just how they deal with donors given the external situation that we're facing, and how they think about communications, and just and maybe even more generally how they might think about approaching these uncertain times. So how does that sound to you?
That sounds good. I'm not happy we have to be talking about it, but it feels like something we definitely should share some thoughts around.
Yeah, it feels like we should weigh in on it. So I know you've given a little thought to this, and you've been talking to your clients about it. So maybe what sort of broad advice have you been giving your clients, and then maybe we can dive into some more specifics.
Yeah, I've been we were chatting earlier. I've been traveling a lot. I've been doing a lot of conferences this season. I've been presenting a lot and then just talking to our clients like we normally do. And I think one of the questions I've been getting kind of most consistently is just how do I talk to my donors about what we're facing as an organization, about how the things in the world are impacting us. And I, it's always an interesting discussion because so many organizations are facing really urgent situations, and yet you don't necessarily want to go out to donors with this like the sky is falling messaging for regarding your organization. And so find striking that balance in terms of how do you kind of be transparent and authentic about what's happening for your organization, but at the same time assuring donors that you're still making good decisions, you're still stable, you are, doing all you can to kind of work through this. And then this, what you and I talk about all the time, is this focus on vision, right? That regardless of anything that might be impacting our organizations today, how are we still got our eye on our long-term vision, and we're going to get there regardless of what's going on in the world. It might take us a little longer, we might take a different path to it, but we're still headed there. And so I think that's just been something I've really been reflecting on, is just generally how do you strike that balance. I don't know if that's a conversation that you've been having with folks as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I've been also reiterating the importance of vision. I think just for that reason, right? Your vision doesn't change, and or at least it doesn't change unless there's like a really good reason. Now, your strategy might change based on the external environment, but you're still trying to create the world that you're trying to create.
Mhm.
And I think that really helps in these times to remind donors. So one, hopefully you've been communicating that all along, and now you can communicate nothing's changed in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. Now, it's going to be harder. We may need more help from you to do that, to accomplish that. We may need, here are some changes we've made strategically to deal with the situation, but we're still driving towards the same world. And I think that really helps a lot, and it takes away from, right, that feeling that you're sort of doing crisis fundraising of some kind, or that you're in trouble in some way. And you may be in trouble. You may be facing real real pressures, legitimate pressures, but at least you can talk about it in a way that, and frame it in a way that it's not, we still want to achieve this vision, but it's harder now. And so we need more help, as opposed to, oh my gosh, we have no money. Please help us. And it's a subtle distinction maybe, but I think a pretty important distinction. I think just another example of why you do want to have that vision, and you do want to have it articulated, and you do want to make sure that you're communicating it regularly to your donors.
Mhm.
What else have you been recommending?
Yeah, I think that the other thing I get a lot of questions about is, so how are donors, the interesting thing about this time is that we are both facing kind of unprecedented changes in policy and in federal funding and in things like that, coupled with uncertainty and threats to the economy, right? Like I think if you look at past times when there has been, I think about rage giving, right? I think about the times when rage giving kind of hit its peak with folks. That could happen because the economy was stable, right? And so at a time when we probably would have seen similarly a lot of rage giving, we're also seeing donors potentially halting because of the economy. And so I get a lot of questions from folks about like, well, how are donors responding? What are donors feeling about the economy? And, you and I both read a lot. We read all the articles and the blog posts that come out. And I've seen, I think, equal amounts of maybe the rule of thirds. I've seen probably a third of articles that are like donors are going to give less. I've seen probably a third of articles that are like, no, donors see more than ever and they're going to dig deep and they're going to step up. And then a third of people who are just like, I don't know. Right. So, and I think, I'm probably in the third category.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I don't know.
We can
And,
make some guesses, but yeah.
and and ultimately I can't, no prognosticator or blogger or consultant can tell you how your donors are feeling, right? So I think about, I have one client right now who is doing a pretty big donor survey. They're doing an online survey coupled with a handful of one-on-one kind of Zoom interviews that we're doing, and asking them directly, like, so how are you feeling about the world, and how is this impacting your philanthropy, and those kinds of questions. And I think, right, again, I had someone ask me in a conference the other day, like, how do you think our donors would like this thing? And I was like, I don't know, I'm not your donor. Like, maybe it sounds nice, but you should really ask them directly. And so I think this is such a great time. I think it can always feel easier to just like write the letter or the email, right? And send it out and just kind of hem and haw and guess as to what the message should be in that email. And I think, like, what if we just talked to our donors first and then we sent the email, right? And got some of their perspectives on how they're feeling about the world, how they're feeling about their own philanthropy, and then how they're feeling about their relationship with us. And then let that kind of drive the messaging that we then put out to everybody. So I think my biggest piece of advice right now is talk to your donors. And at a time when there's going to be fiercer competition than ever for dollars, no better time than now to actually try to engage with folks, not just kind of push out one-way communications, but actually have real conversations.
Yeah, I think that feels pretty important right now because it really is uncertain. And I'm sure there's someone out there will look back and be like, that person got it exactly right. But, it's really hard to tell who that's going to be and what's going to happen. And so, and to your point, the best way to really understand how your donors are feeling is to just ask them directly, like macro trends, it's helpful to kind of understand the larger external environment. I'm not going to say that it's not, but at the end of the day, it's really about your organization and your situation. And so being aware of what's going on, helpful, but much more helpful to be aware of like what's happening in your world and your ecosystem. And related to that too, I mean, last year, what, $455 billion was given away to charity. We don't know whether that's going to go up this year. We don't know whether it's going to go down, and we won't know for 14 months. We'll have anecdotal information, but what we do know is that it's not falling off a cliff. It's going to be, even if it was dramatically down 10-15%, let's say, which would be quite dramatic from a historical perspective, but you'd still be talking about north of $400 billion given away. And so I remind my clients too, like, this is a time, the best time to do stewardship was yesterday, but the next best time to do it is now. And so, a lot of the times when it's difficult, right, it's just who's competing better within the marketplace. It's not like no one's going to get any money and all donors are going to stop giving under all circumstances, but they may get a lot more circumspect about who they're giving to and why they're giving and how much they're giving. And so, again, we've seen in the past, I think, sometimes people, I think if people were giving $10 away to five different organizations, that, so $50 that, if the times are bad, they're just not going to give $50 away. But most likely what they're going to do is give, you know, maybe $30 away to two organizations, or they're going to give $15 away to two organizations. So the average gift still goes up, but it's just to far fewer organizations. And so what can you do to make sure you're one of those organizations, I think is always an important question to ask as well. And so I think the theme here is be in touch, right? Be in touch, be engaging, let people know you're there, that you're making impact, that you still plan to make future impact. And I think the organizations that do that well will be in good shape coming out of this. And the organizations that are not doing that as well are going to struggle, because I think you're right. This is the times of money catching for some organizations, are over. It's not just going to come in because of the rage giving, as you said. You're going to have to work for it a little bit. What else? So I've been asking my clients, to at the start of every call, just like, what's happening? How are you doing? To the points that we're making, and how are you feeling, and what have you heard, and what are you hearing out there? And it strikes me that this is an important time for us all, just as a sector, to be in touch with one another and to really be talking with each other and making connections and just being in communal space together, just being ready for whatever comes down the pike, exchanging advice, exchanging knowledge, exchanging information. So that's something that I've been trying to spend a little time with. What about you? Are there other things that you've been, either on a specific level with your clients, but just sort of thinking about this as a sector? Are there other things that you've been thinking about?
Yeah, it's same. I think, just checking in with folks, and it's been so interesting to see over the last few months. Because every organization, depending on their situation, is in a really different place in terms of how this is all impacting them, or maybe the scale and the timeline on which it's impacting them. So, I had some clients that, day one were hit hard, right? And had to make a lot of adjustments and were scrambling. I have other clients who, you know, didn't see some immediate impacts, but are starting to see some impacts now. I had just had a conversation yesterday with someone who was, doesn't get a lot of federal or state funding, but is seeing that because those people who did have a lot of federal funding are now applying to foundations that they've traditionally always gotten grants from. They're not getting as many of those grants, or those grants are getting smaller because those foundations are feeling like they need to support those groups who are losing some of that federal funding. And so the competition has changed, right, in terms of what's happening. So I think too, that's the thing too, is I think it's really easy to your point about just keeping in touch with people and talking to other folks. It can be really easy to just kind of silo yourself into your own kind of downward spiral of woe is us. And I think there are a lot of people who are doing some really smart things right now. I think there's some people who are really coming together and collaborating and talking about how do we face this together. You even look at just, on a sector level, the 50 foundations that signed the commitment to give more money a couple weeks ago. I know I do a lot of work with the nonprofit association with Oregon, and they've been really active with the other state nonprofit associations to, be advocates around things. And, so I think, again, kind of what, and you even just this week, right? You look at all the threats that were, last week you and I were like, oh, what are you hearing about these rumors, right? About,
Yeah.
international aid and environmental. And then that got quelled, Tuesday came, and I think we were all kind of sitting on the edges of our seats, wondering what was going to happen. And then nothing happened, right? And I think a lot of people are kind of, you know, assuming that part of why nothing happened is because collectively as a sector, we kind of came together and said, hey, that's
Yeah.
not going to fly. Like, that's not going to work. And it it was effective, right? Like that kind of coming together and advocating for our work as a sector worked, right? And so even when things aren't impacting your mission and your organization directly, kind of being part of these conversations and the advocacy, because you don't know when, if your mission and your organization will be the next thing that potentially is on the list to get cut. So it all helps for us to be kind of pulling together.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, yeah, to your point about, I mean, I think there's no way to know, but I suspect you're right that on some level, that got word to the administration that right, that these are important organizations, and right, it's not going to fly to just make those cuts. And I'm heartened to see that foundation, at least some, are giving more money away. And I think that's another area we can collectively push. I think far fewer of them are doing it than I would like to see. And I think the need is going to be maybe even more in some ways than when COVID hit, because there was actually a lot of money flowing through the system, with eventually when the government subsidies kind of kicked in, there was actually quite a bit of money floating around. Whereas this time it may be quite the opposite, and there might really be a real need for that to happen. But the last piece of advice I've been giving clients is that, and this is particularly true of foundations, but it may also be true for whatever high net worth individuals you may be dealing with, is like, they're still rich. If they're not giving you money, it's because they're choosing not to give you money. But if you make a case and you have a strong vision for what you're trying to achieve, and you're a credible message bearer for that vision, meaning you have some track record and have some reason for people to believe that you could at least pull off the vision, maybe they'll give more money away. Maybe as a sector, more money will be given away. Maybe specifically to your organization, or to maybe you're working in partnership with other organizations. But we're not talking about like, oh, we can't give you money because we'll go broke. We're not. They're fine. They could give. Look how trouble Mackenzie Scott has had giving away all of her wealth, because it's not that easy to give away when you have, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in endowment money. And so it's a choice, and I would urge foundations to give more money away. But even if they're not making a collective pledge to give 10% away this year, it doesn't mean that they might not give you something if there is something worthy of it. So just keep that in mind, and like, don't defeat yourself, I would say. The worst they can say is no. But if not now, when? And if you have a clear vision, I think it's just important to remember that they're still rich. So
Well, and to your what you just said, any conversations you're having, again, whether it's a foundation funder, an individual, corporation, any conversation, even if it is a no today, is still moving your relationship forward with them, so that if they are ready to jump back in and give more, hopefully you will be on the top of the list of the people who will get that funding first, because you were the one who reached out, who had an authentic conversation, who talked about what they're trying to achieve, how you're helping to achieve those same things, right? Values alignment, mission alignment, vision alignment, all that stuff. And I think this other thing about DAFs, I think like people are losing money in those accounts anyway. They might as well just give it to you, right? Like rather than lose it to the fluctuations in the market. Like, give it to you and get the tax benefits, right? So I think that there are some people and just yesterday I think there was an article in Chronicle of Philanthropy that said exactly very similar to what you said, which is this economic crisis is not hitting everyone equally, right? So there are still plenty of people and some people who are making more money now
absolutely.
because of what's happening, and I, on a personal level, don't feel great about that. But I think on a professional philanthropic level, and going out and trying to do good things in the world, like, let's take advantage of that and get as much of that pie as we can.
Absolutely. So yeah, unless you have something you want to add, I thought maybe we'll leave it there, I think. So Yeah, it's I'm sure we'll revisit this topic as the situation evolves, but I've personally been happy to see us come together as a sector, and I think we'll just see more of that. So on that level, I'm optimistic that that we'll weather these funding cuts, and we'll adjust, as a sector, and I think we'll figure it out. So, well, thanks for joining me again, Laurel. Till the next time, we thanks, and everyone else who's watching this. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again at the next TOG chat.